Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Agti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
In this episode, Aaron and Trishul highlight their career paths. They then discuss what led them to create independent advisory firms after joining the XY Planning Network. Trishul started by writing a financial blog before realizing he wanted to provide more individualized help. Aaron failed out of sales before joining another RIA as an employee for a decade. In preparing for partnership status, Aaron realized he wanted more control over how he wanted to help his unique clients. But in the end, it was lifestyle implications that led them both to going solo. And now, on to our conversation.
Hi, my name is Aaron Agti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey Aaron, great to be here today, and thanks everybody for listening.
Great to be here as well. So last week we talked about the CFP designation, kind of congratulating Trishul for passing the CFP exam. And one of the things we had kind of touched on was that the CFP board, the Certified Financial Planner Board, now requires a fiduciary standard. We also talked about how the CFP board has an advisor find function where you can use their website to find an advisor who has passed the CFP exam and maintained all their continuing education. And we also, as kind of following on that conversation, we always talk afterwards, and we talked about how the XY Planning Network also has an advisor find function. Then once Trishul's CFP is official, then he'll be able to be on that advisor find function as well. And we started kind of thinking about, so today we're going to use a few acronyms. CFP is Certified Financial Planner. XYPN is the XY Planning Network. And the other ones we'll talk about are RIA, a registered investment advisor, and BD as a broker-dealer. We'll explain those in a few minutes. But we were kind of talking about how we got to XYPN because Trish and I met through XYPN. We were both members of the XY Planning Network. And it was instrumental for both of us in starting our own firms. And we want to kind of talk about today about how we came to XYPN and kind of how and why we started our own firms the way we did, kind of why we went independent when there were other potential career paths available to us that may or may not have been able to provide different levels of support or different lifestyle choices. And so today we will kind of try to talk about our journey to create our own firms, our choice of independence, and kind of where XYPN fits into that. So the kind of acronyms I mentioned, the RIA, Registered Investment Advisor. This is a abbreviation for a firm that is registered with either state securities or the SEC to be able to charge fees providing investment advice. And financial planning goes along with that. Anytime you're recommending any kind of investment, you have to be registered as an investment advisor. So individual people are IARs, investment advisor representatives of registered investment advisors. RIAs will be the firm. There are also broker-dealers. Those are firms that are allowed to sell securities or other investment products along with a few other things, and they can charge a commission for those. So this is the kind of classic example. If you had a stockbroker in the 80s and you want to buy a few hundred shares, you would actually pay a commission for that trade. And the stockbroker, that's how they made money, was that the commission on that trade. This evolved into mutual funds where now if you worked for a BD, you were a registered representative. That was the title for the individuals who are able to sell securities as part of a BD, as part of a broker-dealer. It evolved to being able to sell mutual funds. You'd charge a share load, get a 5% commission on the mutual fund that you sold. There are other things that you could do. There were B shares, there are C shares, and started combined with the insurance industry, where now you had registered reps who are also insurance licensed. And this actually is something I did in a past life, where you could sell insurance, also collect the commission. And then if you used variable life insurance, where now you are selling an insurance product that also has securities inside it, you actually need both an insurance license and be a registered rep. So I bring these up as context because when Trish and I had the possibility of starting our own firms and going independent, we also could have pursued a different path. We could have gone to work for a broker dealer. This is, if you ever hear the term wirehouse, this might be an example where there are people whose job is to sell investment products, investment securities, and it's a little bit more of a sales job. They have kind of just as much freedom and flexibility that any other sales job has, as long as they are meeting certain production requirements. So there's both support from kind of a sales manager and education and teaching, and a variety of back office support and kind of products available to you, and additional training, education, and kind of compliance work. You don't have to worry about any of the necessities that requires to actually run the firm. You just get to go out, meet with people, and sell these investment products. We could have gone to work for a larger RIA. So there are a variety of large registered investment advisors that have a kind of a variety of roles within them. Abacus is one of the ones that comes to mind. Fisher Investments might be one, where there are both those whose responsibility is business development. That's a phrase for, it's kind of the client acquisition. It's not truly sales because you're not selling a product, but you are convincing clients to hire that firm, and then they're going to pay fees to that firm. Vast majority of the time, it's fees on assets under management. That's just how most RIAs are paid. It's actually been around since the Investment Advisors Act and the Securities Exchange Act all the way back in the 1930s, but it's really just become a little more popular in the last couple decades. But because there's enough revenue from clients of these large firms, they also have a variety of support roles within the firm, where you might have a compliance person who's just a salaried employee who takes care of overseeing all the employees and makes sure that they're meeting all their compliance requirements. You might have just an investment person, again, a salaried individual who's making investment choices for that firm, but there's no business development requirements. So there's actually a lot of just regular 9-to-5 roles where you have to make a salary. And some of these actually have really good salaries, just like any other large profitable firm. And there's all kind of variety of assistant roles. You can have a few part-time roles, administrative roles. And if you were a financial advisor whose primary job is to bring on clients, you could actually, again, similar to the sales positions or similar to being independent, control your own schedule, but you don't have to worry about the business side of things, like registering with the state as a corporation, or making sure the corporate tax returns are filed. It's just it kind of, there's a lot of the back office items that are much easier because they're taken off your plate because there's someone else whose job is to do those things. And I give this as context for this idea that we didn't have to go independent. We didn't have to join XYPN, but we did. And so I know I've been talking for a while, but Trishul, I kind of wanted to start the conversation. I know you had worked for a hedge fund. I think they were technically an RIA, but when you decided to start your own firm, had you decided to start your firm first and then found XYPN and used them as a resource to help you? Or did you find XYPN and through their education and outreach realized starting your own firm and going independent was a viable path for you? Kind of so first, at what point did you decide you were going to create your own firm? And how did XYPM play into that? And did you consider some of those other paths that were these potentially available to you?
Right. It's an interesting kind of backstory on how I ended up here specifically, but I think it kind of just ended up growing organically into the business, following just one thing leading to another. When I first left the hedge fund, I frankly just started to work on other life goals besides my career. So that was kind of my main focus for a good amount of time. Something I mentioned way back is I started writing a novel. I started doing a lot of traveling. I started to kind of just decompress from the corporate world for a good bit. And I just really had no clear plans on what to do next. And, something that somebody once told me back then, some good piece of advice is if you're feeling, that kind of burnout and you want to take a sabbatical, which is kind of what I did, don't really think about the future. Just kind of really take that time to be away from the corporate world. And that's pretty much what I did. And having no real desire to go back to a 9 to 5, I started thinking roughly what I wanted to do with the remainder of my time. And it actually just started by, having finance related conversations with friends and family. And what I kind of started to realize is I've come a long way with my understanding of what makes sense and what doesn't. And me just thinking to myself, I always thought, okay, what I kind of know is well known, and everybody kind of knows what to do, and everybody's kind of doing it. But then, kind of peeking under the rug a bit, I realized that it's not quite the case. In fact, just a lot of things that I kind of took for granted with my own financial life, I realized that it really wasn't even too common with individuals in the finance industry. So I thought it might be helpful to provide, some guidance to others who maybe they just don't have the time or the priority to put their effort into these types of concerns. Maybe it just kind of gets the short end of the stick, like everybody else who, wants to go to the gym more, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So I thought, why don't I just start a blog? So that's how I began this whole journey. I just started writing one day, and I quickly looked up, can you write about financial advice without having to create any sort of strict requirements? And yeah, if it's for educational purposes only, then the guidelines are pretty loose. You can do that. And that's what I did. I just started putting out content just because it's one of those things where, Aaron, we mentioned this as part of the podcast itself. It has this sort of cathartic notion of, just being able to get your ideas out there. And it's a little bit of a form of therapy, frankly, just to be able to share things that you want to get off your chest. So that's frankly what it was for me for a good amount of time. I just started saying, all right, well, this will be something I can do. I have a lot of thoughts. Let me just put them on not paper, but on computer and see what happens. And over time, I did start to interact more with kind of friends and family, and it did occur to me maybe there's some insight that I could share on a one-on-one basis that might be helpful. So that's where that kind of light bulb went off on how about I just offer financial advice to whoever kind of wants it and is willing to sit down with me to go over some of these things. And initially, I thought it'd be very easy. I file a few forms, I check off a few boxes, and I make a quick website, and then people just set up meetings with me. And I thought the rest would be kind of history. But it turns out if you want to offer financial advice, there's a lot more you need to do to actually be on the right side of regulations. It's a highly regulated industry, and that's where I started uncovering all the things that you need to do to get registered and be compliant, and the ongoing checks and balances you need to put in place. And as I just started moving from one step to the next in my planning process, I realized, well, this is going to take up a good amount of time. It's about time that I think about a formal business here. And that's kind of what led me down this entire path. And then it came to the notion of, okay, how can I actually set up a business being kind of independent on my own? It never occurred to me to go work for another company and do this as an employee. That was certainly not something I was thinking about, or not something I wanted to do, nor do I want to do that today. It was more about, how can I get the most amount of life freedom, but still provide a benefit to those who would like it. And yeah, from that standpoint, I did come across XYPN, and I realized that the firm had a lot of things that kind of stood out to me as being sensible. For example, they had this notion of their advisors that they have in their network, they're sworn fiduciaries. Well, okay, great. That's a checkbox I wanted to meet. It made sense to me. They also have this notion that a lot of their advisors are virtually based, and ding, that's certainly something I was going for. And it also opened my eyes to this notion of fee only. Again, my initial premise was, yeah, just charge a fee. And we've talked about fee only before, the distinction between having a commission-based model versus a model where the fees are only from you and the client. And that resonated with me as well. So that there's a lot of boxes that XYPN checked off that kind of fit what I was going for. And they were really geared towards independent advisors, individuals who are looking to kind of get started, or if they have a small book, to kind of break off on their own and build a bigger business. And it's probably worth mentioning XY in XYPN stands for Gen X, Gen Y. So this also fits into the kind of clients that I'm hoping to serve, high-performing professionals who are looking for financial freedom sooner rather than later. And having seen what's available in terms of setting up and running and managing and putting me in touch with a network of other like-minded individuals, I certainly saw a good fit with XYPN. And then pretty much the rest is kind of history, because it's just following all the steps that you need to do to create a business, get registered, be compliant, and do all of the ongoing things. And that's all the brick and mortar stuff, although it's virtual, that I've kind of assembled for myself. But again, the main goal was to offer advice, but do it as a sort of lifestyle choice. It's a lifestyle business for me.
That's actually really interesting. And I actually took some notes, and I for me personally, I feel like I ended up at XYPN almost from like the complete opposite end. Before I get to my story, I'm curious, if you had been writing and the blog was doing well, and maybe like you had enough people reading the blog to actually generate some revenue, like, would you feel that would, I don't want to say satisfy the itch, but like, would you feel fulfilled from that perspective? Like, if that happened to have taken off and you were careful to like only providing generalized information and not specific investment advice to any individuals, so you didn't have to worry about the compliance side, like, if you could kind of make money from the blog, do you think that you might have continued down that path, or was there some point you realized you wanted to work with individuals and households?
So when I was researching various tax strategies, I ran into a consultant who, he had a website and he had a lot of good content on his blog, and he had a very simple business model. He had a calendar, you book a time, and I think it was like $300 an hour, and you get to kind of ask him anything you want. And I thought, well, hey, that's not a bad idea. And that's kind of what I was thinking for myself, because I do like getting into the nitty gritty as it relates to more personal advice. And I was kind of looking for something where I could offer that advice with a low level of, engagement, meaning I didn't want to wine and dine clients. I didn't want to, frankly, even have to meet them in person, but I still wanted to get what I wanted to say across in a meaningful way. So that's kind of what brought me to adding in the component to, offer a more one-on-one type of service. So that it did occur to me soon after the blog that would be something I want to add into the business. But again, it turns out that's a lot more complicated and a lot more harder to do than one would expect right off the bat.
So you 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 were cognizant that you wanted the one-on-one perspective because you could see kind of how helpful and valuable that is. But now it's it's no longer general information. Now it's you have to be registered and follow certain compliance of certain securities laws. And so if you're going to be doing all these, then okay, we might as well make a business out of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's probably too much overhead. That's what I found out, to just be offering, that one-on-one for an hour or two here and there, because there's a lot, frankly, that goes into maintaining an advisory business beyond just speaking to the clients, especially if you're small and getting off the ground. There's more of a hurdle, because at the end of the day, I'm the web designer, I'm the chief compliance officer, I'm the sales manager, I'm the marketing manager. So you have to wear a lot of hats to have enough, time to just offer that advice component of the business, which is the primary purpose.
Yes, I think very roughly, and there's such a wide range of possibilities, but like I think the bare minimum of business expenses that you would have to have would be something like $6,000 to $20,000 a year. And it's like you're running really, really lean, doing all the work yourself, not paying for anything. But it's like even if it was that $6,000 mark, which again, this is like after startup costs. Startup costs will be more, but like this, like on an ongoing basis, you still need just enough clients so that your hobby or side gig of trying to help people one-on-one isn't costing you money.
Right. Yeah,
That
no, that's a good
$300 an
point.
hour is you need enough hours to make up for that.
Yeah, right. And it's not just the time, of course, that you're with a client that takes up, your resources. As you mentioned, financially, there's all this other overhead for a business. Even though it's virtual, there is a good amount of technology that goes into it, and all this regulatory and compliance stuff. And yeah, at the same time, there's a lot of kind of upkeep on what's going on with the industry itself.
Yeah. So uh, I do like the story, and I want to provide a little background before, but I wrote down when you're looking at XYPN, they're fiduciary, virtual, and fee only, and I'm gonna get to kind of why that did not apply to me at all. Uh, but so after graduating college, I knew I wanted to get in the financial services industry, and Ameriprise was hiring a lot of people right out of college, and they provide a really good training education for financial advisors. I learned enough from them to be able to pass the CFP exam, and they also provide a lot of sales training, which again, coming out of college, I had no knowledge on either of those. They were both an RIA and a BD, and so that was kind of my experience. Like that's how I learned about you can either charge an advisory fee or you can charge an A-share mutual fund. And if you can sell VULs, that 7% commission really helps you get started meeting some of their sales requirements. Because if someone comes to you with $100,000 and you put it in a fee-based advisory account, even if you were doing just the AUM side, which was a standard at the time, you'll make $1,000 that first year, but again, you don't get paid that first $250 for the next quarter. But if you did an A-share mutual fund, which again is still a viable strategy over a long enough time frame, expenses can be lower if there's no changes to it. You get paid $5,000 up front. So it's like, well, if they're pressuring me to meet all of these revenue requirements, then that commission getting started like feels like there's a really big incentive for me to kind of go down that path. Then if I can do a variable annuity with living benefit riders, which did have their place, and for some people they made a lot of sense, and especially going through 2001, 2002, and then 2007, 2008, some of the downside protections really helped those individuals. But those had the really high internal fees plus the rider expenses, but that was a 7% commission. And so again, now it's like that $100,000 is a $7,000 commission. And at that, again, I'm right out of college. I didn't really know anything else. It was just they did a great job with sales training and pushed us. And I had a sales manager that was responsible to that, again, provided great training. I think they were great at their jobs, but there were enough people. There's kind of so much turnover. It was throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks that they were kind of hiring a new like mini class. It'd be like a new, say, 4 advisors per month kind of thing. But then 12 to 18 months later, vast majority of them have moved on. Either they're not meeting those revenue expectations, or they just realize they don't like that sales culture. So I bring this up. It's just one way of working in this industry. And for those who are successful, they got to a point where they had enough clients, they had enough ongoing revenue, and they got to control their schedule. Ameriprise took care of all of the back office work, a lot of the compliance work, all the taxes, accounting. All they need to do is meet with clients and kind of make sure their clients are happy. But you had to get to that point. You had to go through the really, really tough times and survive that. And I realized kind of within like 18 months, the sales side just didn't fit me. I just did not enjoy it. I liked hanging out with my current clients more than trying to find a new client. So I left. I found another RIA, and I was an employee for them for a decade. I was their director of financial planning. There's no business development expectations, no kind of going out and finding new clients. It's just they already had a stable amount of clients, and I did all the financial planning work for them. And so I loved the arrangement. It suited my lifestyle. It was a good 9-to-5 job. They were nice. There's a lot of flexibility. I got a decent amount of vacation. They were kind of good bosses. And I started reading Michael Kitces, who was one of the co-founders of XYPN, but he's just really helped build all of that financial planning knowledge. And I started transitioning to reading what Michael Kitces was write about the financial advisory industry, and I guess it would be called practice management, like how advisory firms grow, what the future of the industry looks like. This is where I really start understanding the different business models between a place like Ameriprise versus the RIA is working at. And this is kind of, because I had experienced at Ameriprise, I saw both the pros and cons of both sides. And it's, again, not to say either is right or wrong, but they just have different risks, different career choices. And I enjoyed working for that RIA. And so I started trying to get ready to be kind of present to the owners that I'd like to be a partner in this firm. That there were 4 advisors at the time. They had built up the business. They combined it. I was one of 4 staff, and I wanted to try and get to the point of being a partner in the firm. And as I was doing this research, I kind of realized, there's this one thing that one of the advisors is doing that I actually don't think is a good idea from a business perspective. I think that's actually an unnecessary business risk that they're taking on. And one of the other partners was doing something different, but it's also like, well, I don't know that that's a good business strategy. And one of the advisors was older and is very kind of, again, great boss, great advisor, had been doing it for long enough, and a lot of his clients were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it's like, well, I actually attended a couple client funerals, and kind of there wasn't as much of the kind of ongoing generational planning that I thought the the business really needed. And so as I was kind of reading Michael Kitces, and again, because he's a co-founder of XYPN, I started reading the XYPN site and kind of realizing that just because I was ready to be a partner at this firm, that wasn't the only path I had in front of me. And there were kind of, if I was to buy out one of the older advisors, or at least kind of buy into the being a partner of the firm, there were certain business risks that I'd be taking on. And it took me a lot of education, especially from XYPN, of like, am I comfortable with those business risks and how those might impact my lifestyle? And so when I went to start my own firm, like you said, XYPN, they were fiduciary. I was already a fiduciary, like because I was already at an RIA, so that wasn't a factor for me. Like I was going to be a fiduciary either way. They were mostly virtual. I actually had originally wasn't planning on being virtual. I was planning on working with clients in the Bay Area because that's where I lived and worked, and that was kind of what I learned at my prior firm. The vast majority of the clients lived nearby, so they would meet in one of two offices. And XYPN was fee only, and that's also something else that I wasn't planning on. We actually did have a broker deal a relationship, so and I had an insurance license, so we could sell insurance when necessary. I think the best example of when it does come into play that is something that kind of fee only doesn't quite address would be something like a uh, permanent second to die life insurance policy. So this would be for a couple who knows they are going to be above the estate tax exemption and they will have an estate tax bill. Uh, Especially a couple clients, most of their net worth was in properties. And so if they're going to pay the estate tax bill, it might require selling some of these properties within like a 9-month time frame. I don't remember the exact timing, but it was just properties are illiquid and it's kind of hard to get those ready to sell so fast, especially after the death of the kind of older generation. And so one of the family goals was to kind of keep these properties in the family business. And so the best way to do that was using a permanent life insurance policy that was a second to die. So by making it second to die, you put it usually husband and wife, whoever passes away second, that's when it pays out. And so because it's based on two lives and the actuarial tables, like just the odds of it lasting longer, so there's more money being paid in premiums going in that for a longer time frame. The annual premiums on a second to die policy can actually be much cheaper than the same amount of life insurance on each of the husband and wife. So a single second die policy can be more cost effective than two individual policies. But this had to be permanent. Like we had to be a permanent life insurance policy, and it couldn't lapse, kind of thing. So this was an example of, yeah, I was glad I had my insurance license to be able to help clients in this situation. And by joining XYPN, they were going to ask me to go fee only and make a commitment that I would no longer be selling insurance. And that was actually one of the struggles for me. Like, do I give up my insurance license? It's actually almost easier for me to give up my securities license, because again, I was going to that we were already more or less fee only on the investment side, but it's things like helping clients with long-term care insurance, helping clients with disability insurance. These are really important things, and kind of as their advisor, I need to make sure that they're in place. And could I give that part up to go fee only and join XYPN? And in the end, there was a good analogy of advisors who recommend CPAs, and estate planning attorneys. Like you, that's something that's just as necessary, but you don't help them with their tax return unless you actually happen to be a CPA, or you don't help them draft their will and trust. You refer to an attorney because they're experts in that area. And I should be looking at the insurance side similarly, where yes, I know they need disability insurance and long-term care, but I'm not the expert in those. There are good resources where I can refer out just the insurance component, especially there are firms and other individuals that are focused on the insurance side that don't have any expectation of doing any of the financial planning or investment management. And so kind of once I realized, okay, I had saved up enough to kind of buy into this partnership. There were a couple long-term business risks that I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to pay a lot of money to join into. I was hesitant about going fee only, but realized okay that's an acceptable side, and the virtual is just sure. I can meet with I happen to have a couple clients not immediately in the Bay Area, so this might be a little easier to help them out. And so I joined XYPN in part because I realized that the money that I'd saved up to buy into the partnership could actually support my lifestyle while I was building a business. And XYPN did a great job of being very upfront about that, where it does take time to build a business, and the hardest part is actually on the personal lifestyle side of can you afford to pay your bills while you're not earning income for 2 to 3 years. And so I kind of saved up for enough for that. And so now I'm actually really, really happy with XYPN, mostly because I've met other advisors like you. And I have a few other XYPN members that is kind of what you were talking about, where it was almost the mentality of who we're looking to work with. I ended up having my own office with my standing desk, and I had Zoom all set up before COVID hit. So while I wasn't planning on being virtual only, like I was already ready for it. So that's actually really, really easy for me to adapt. But over the first couple years, kind of I still knew at that time I could have gone to be a employee advisor of a firm like Abacus. That's still something I was considering because that wouldn't require the startup costs. But for me, on the personal side, it was the control aspect. Like I use SEI as a third-party asset manager for investments because I genuinely think they provide incredible asset allocation and tax management on their investments. And so they've incorporated direct indexing. I think that they've been really far ahead of the game on that. They have done I feel like a better job than Betterment and Wealthfront on the ETF side. Sometimes they're slow on the technology side because they're a finance company first, and they're really going to make sure they follow all of the rules. But I wanted to keep using SEI. That was one of those things that was really important to me. And if I went to work for Abacus, that was not an option. So I also wanted to be able to allow clients to text me. And so this is a weird kind of regulation where all advisors need to store communications with clients. And so vast majority is if it's via email, then there's just email archiving systems, and text, if anything other than just basic scheduling, anytime you're talking to a client about their situation, because there was no archival system, texts were not considered compliant. But I knew that these technologies would come out, that I could set this up, and that's one of those little things that I wanted to do. And I wanted to keep using eMoney is the financial planning software that I use. And there were enough of these other little things that I realized I wanted that control to do it the way I wanted. It most commonly plays out in actually my fee structure, where I don't charge fees based on assets under management. I charge fees based on income and net worth, and let clients know that they can pay me monthly or quarterly, but there's no long-term commitment. So if they aren't happy with the relationship, or they feel like, oh, I got all the value I needed, I don't necessarily need any more work moving forward, they can move on and there's no requirement. And the vast majority of other firms just weren't set up to be able to do this. There's either kind of, you had to move money over or use their investment system. And so enough of these things kind of kept adding up that I wanted the control to be able to help the clients I wanted to the way I wanted to. And going independent kind of ended up being the only way, where like I have enough clients now, and this is kind of played out enough where they, especially because I have an expertise in stock options, a decent amount of their net worth, especially here in the Bay Area, is their equity compensation that's maybe vested or unvested, their 401k, ESPP, and other employee benefits, and their home or real estate. And they're clients with $1 million net worth, but they might only have $100,000 in will be considered liquid investments. And other firms wouldn't be able to kind of help with the complexity of planning that the equity compensation required, because they're only set up to help with that $100,000 liquid investment. It's not the other part of their $1 million net worth. And so when you say kind of XYPN was fiduciary, virtual, and fee only, it's like, for me, it was control, choosing the technologies I wanted, being able to help clients the way I wanted to, and then the community of advisors that I've been able to interact with through XYPN has been truly fulfilling. I genuinely enjoy the conversations with you and a variety of other XYPN members that are very similar, especially on the equity compensation side. We have a conversation every other week, and it really is kind of personally and professionally fulfilling to be part of this network, even though kind of like you, again, from the opposite, like I wasn't looking to join XYPN. Is more like, as I was taking all of these decisions, these individual components, and kind of I even apply like Kinder's 3 questions to my own life, and having the control both of my own calendar and my schedule and the way I wanted to help clients. Going independent was kind of the only option, and XYPN was by far the most helpful organization in going independent. I think that's probably the best way. Like, they helped me realize that they're just one part of the decision-making process, but I wanted to be independent. And I think like Garrett Planning Network is close to similar. They provide a little more structure, but that'd be another kind of thing. But RIA in a box, and there's a couple of compliance that could help me get off the ground with some of the compliance components. But XYPN was really well set up to provide all the help I needed in terms of establishing a business, because I did realize I wanted to start my own independent financial advisory firm, and XYPN was there for me. Sorry, I know that was a long one. Sorry.
All good. Yeah, it's good to get some more color on, just the backstory on how you ended up here. I think the independence part is definitely something that resonated with me. And there are many other big firms out there, or even medium-sized firms, that provide the types of services we do. But I think, yeah, that control aspect, the ability to make those executive decisions based upon, what, for example, for me, what I really thought made the most sense, I think that's been the most liberating part of having this type of business where, of course, the buck stops here, but at the same time, I'm happy to be accountable for these types of decisions. And it's something that I think it also fits my personality as well. I like the opportunity to, build up this kind of system. We're calling it a business, but it's all these little building blocks that we have kind of assembled together to formulate this one structure. And each block, you get to decide what makes the most sense here and which window makes the most sense there, and what's the best, type of garage door and so on. And really, it's coming together into something where I like the home, and would love to live here on a go forward basis, and I'm happy to have whoever else wants to join me. So I think it's definitely been a great experience. And I was even thinking as you were speaking, I don't know if I would have done anything different to end up where I am today, except maybe starting many years sooner.
That's an interesting question. What, like the road not taking kind of thing? Like, would I have done anything different? Because I don't know if I would have started earlier. Because I think for me, um, buying into the partnership at my prior firm, that came with just a little bit of security that there were already clients at that firm, and so I didn't have to worry about kind of, what if I'm not good in the marketing and business development side and can't get enough clients to get to the point I want. And because there's enough kind of already built in there that was not necessarily a realistic risk if I stayed. It would have been one of those. Um, I've seen good, like, little comics of, let's not take any risks and continue our slow decline into obsolescence. It's not quite that extreme, but it does. The What might have been the safer option in the short term might have been the riskier option in the long term, where the growth potential of that firm, just based on client base, might not have been that strong. Whereas if I start from scratch, it's kind of like it comes from saying, like, if you're all the way at the bottom, the only places to go is up. Um, but I'm trying, but I was cognizant of the fact that, say, 5 years ago, I was not ready to be responsible for revenue growth, of generating revenue for a firm or a business. Um, I think within that, say, 4 years ago, I started to realize, okay, I need to, if I want to be a partner at a firm, and kind of for any profitable business, you need to be able to provide something that kind of affects the bottom line, either bringing on clients or kind of providing some level of service that keeps those clients happy and engaged. But in the financial services industry, the vast majority of revenue growth comes from just bringing on new clients, and I had to get comfortable at that point. And so I kind of, again, probably on the scale of 4 years ago, really started doing a deep dive into marketing. Um, Again, I had a little bit of sales training from my time back at Ameriprise, so it's kind of trying to remember that and apply that. And so I got a chance to practice a little bit, but that was the big leap for me. Like, I knew I could do all the planning work, and my technical chops are strong, but it's the uh, could I meet with new people and help them understand, like, kind of how I could help them as their financial advisor. If they're talking to two or three other advisors, how am I different? And at least kind of focusing on that education aspect. That was probably the scary leap for me. So I don't think I could have done it sooner, in part because I just wasn't ready.
Yeah, I think for myself that's probably true. Meaning, a decade ago, for example, I certainly didn't have the investment and planning experience that I do today. Having gone through this for such a long period of time. However, a part of me says the being the business owner aspect, for a company in general, I feel like it just resonates a lot more with my personality. And I think I would have enjoyed the opportunity to try it out at a larger scale sooner rather than later. I think I probably wouldn't have been qualified to do this specifically, that long ago. But I think, just having a glorified lemonade stand, that would have been interesting. Yeah. Or something like that.
Oh, that's
It's
interesting
the
because
note. Yep.
I actually I don't know that I enjoy or was looking forward to the business owner side. Like I I actually can envision that I might have been comfortable at a firm where if they as long as they gave me the freedom in terms of control of my schedule and implementing some of the things that I wanted to do, uh, mostly kind of on the technology investment side. But if they took care of taxes and accounting and bookkeeping and the compliance side, I actually would kind of have no problem giving that up, even if it costs me 20% of my revenue, something like that. Like I'm sure there's some kind of agreement there, and I know that there's other firms that do that, but it was one of those things like like the control again. I can go back. Control of my schedule and calendar was like the most important part to me. But there are other firms that'll provide that flexibility, kind of that they'll do the back office work, and you don't have to be the business owner. Again, they own the business, but uh, as long as you're meeting with clients, then there's no expectations. But I know that's a viable path that I could have taken, but it would have been just a little bit too much conforming to their structure. Like, and I think using SCI was probably one of the big ones. I think that was pretty consistent. All the firms that might have offered that. I didn't go too far down this path, but I did do some research into those large RIAs. And part of their scale is that they do all their investments in house. And so, and they provide again, they have that CFA who's doing the investments or a team of CFAs, and they're putting together all the strategies and either implementing it at the ETF level or direct indexing, whatever they're doing. But it's like they're doing that in house, and that's part of their offering and part of how they can do it at scale well. And that's one thing I didn't want to give up. Like I actually really wanted to use SEI, and again, I stay on top of them and I keep pushing them, and I'm not beholden to them. So if they ever lag, then I can move on to someone else. I can either do it myself at like a place like TD Ameritrade or Schwab. I could use one of their competitors. Uh, I'm trying to think of the name because we had used them before. AssetMark. AssetMark is a competitor SCI. I could go with them. So it's like if SCI doesn't hold up there in the bargain, I can move on pretty easily. But it was kind of and like I keep coming back to like that texting example. That's another thing. Like those big firms, their compliance departments, just because they're supervising so many people, they don't want their employees texting clients because then they have to supervise and manage that as well. Like they already have good systems in place for email, and they're kind of like, nope, email is fine. So yeah, like from the calendar and the time flexibility, those other firms, those large RIAs might have provided that. I think they would have, but it was still all the other little things that I wanted to control and do it my way that I had to go independent for.
Yep. Yeah. Right on.
So do you think you'll be doing anything different in the next few years or down the road? Do you see anything that kind of the back of your mind maybe you transition, or are you kind of really happy with the path that you're on?
Yeah, I think I am pretty happy with the path I'm on. My kind of sweet spot with my career, since graduating from business school, I ended up working, for two firms over that time: the options trading firm in Southeast Asia and the hedge fund here in Florida. And in both cases, I was, uh, reporting directly to the CEO. I was the head of the primary revenue driver for each firm, and I was able to, kind of grow teams and grow business and stuff like that, and had a good amount of autonomy. And the sweet spot was basically, growing a business from having, like two or three people in the revenue driving unit to like 6 or 7 or 8. And it ended up going pretty well in both cases. But the interesting part is, I probably, or my current plan is not to even get to that scale at this point, even though it's something that I feel I would be quite comfortable with. I think as of now, the plan is to kind of remain small and nimble, and hopefully that gives me the enough freedom to, keep my flexibility in terms of how I want to use my time. So I don't think there's any major changes, but who knows? That's the great part. I'm able to change if I want to down the road.
Yeah, I think I don't see moving on from Greystone or kind of giving up that part of the business, but I think a huge factor is like XYPN is kind of helping on the other end where they're showing other technology companies that there's enough demand, where there's enough kind of smaller independent advisors that if they can provide a service, there's enough people where it's a viable business for them. So there are things that I can outsource over time. Some of the compliance, the archival work. I've already outsourced the bookkeeping side, and I can see kind of adding more of those outsourcing technologies, maybe hiring an employee or two, but I I don't at this point I can't necessarily envision going to one of those larger RIAs. Even if I got to again, my priority would kind of keeping my clients happy and only if it worked for them, but those kinds of transitions tend to be very doable and achievable if that's the priority. And I at this point I don't see that.
Right. That there's this distinction that I remember reading about a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, but it stayed with me since then. There's a core difference between a business and a practice. So the distinction is, with a practice, you typically have a professional, maybe like a doctor who has their own office, and they have to physically do the main work that drives the revenue for the business. Meaning, if they don't work at their practice and they go put in fewer hours, well, then the business generates less revenue and vice versa. But the notion of a business is, as the business grows, rather than a practice, it's set up such that the more the business grows, the less you need to actually do to drive the business forward. So as the business scales in size, you can generate more revenue and more income for less of your time and energy. And my initial thinking over the last decade or two was, yeah, business makes sense. It's important that it's an important efficiency achievement where, yeah, the more the business scales, the less you have to work to get an incremental dollar of income. That totally made sense to me. But now that I've kind of changed my mindset a bit, I'm actually more in favor of having a practice. And for me, again, it seems to be more about, this is what I like doing. So why would
Mm-hmm.
I focus on reducing that component? And certainly I can outsource, like you said, the other things that aren't core to what I enjoy the most. That's the flexibility as the business owner or practice owner I would get to do. But yeah, I want to retain the component that I enjoy, the actual planning and the investment management piece, where working to solve these types of financial problems on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that XYPN actually helps kind of address this difference pretty well. And I'm also in the practice side of it, but I think at this point, like I almost wonder if my fear of bringing on a team and trying to manage people, I don't say fears, distaste maybe, like lack of desire,
Reluctance.
What was that? Hesitance? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Is similar to my concerns about business development and marketing 5 years ago. Like maybe 5 years down the road, I'm okay with the idea of managing a team, whereas right now I'm not. Like it's like I genuinely have no idea. But it's trying to acknowledge that the future is going to change, and just because this is the way I am right now does not mean it's going to be the same 5 years from now.
Right, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your story, Trishul. This is a good history. I like hearing your transition from blog to business owner.
Well, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, and I enjoyed learning about your backstory as well. It's certainly something that it's interesting to see how there's different paths to end up here, and we all have different motivations. But it's nice to see that there are opportunities out there that can fit individuals more closely, and it's just a matter of taking that initiative to kind of get there.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk again next week.
Yeah, good stuff. And thanks everybody for listening. If you're enjoying these conversations, do spread the word. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.